Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name's Simon Gray, and I'm going to be running proceedings this evening, along with Elizabeth, who will be joining us shortly. He's live on the air and waiting to speak. Just before we get going, we're just waiting for a few more people to turn up. We've got quite a few people expected on the line tonight, and people are gradually dripping through. So just so we can check that the technology works, if you could perhaps just find the question box on your control panel, and just type in there who you are, the city you're logging in from tonight or today, if you're in the States, of course, and perhaps just a couple of words as to what you hope to get out of the webinar this evening. Okay, Derek from Leicester, welcome Derek, just down the road from me. Andrew from Stroud, welcome. Welcome. We're also testing, of course, that the audio works, which it does. That's great to hear. So where else are people calling in from this evening? Okay, we'll just wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get going. Okay. So Derek said he's an operations director looking for MD, general manager, or general manager positions. So yeah, we're going to cover all of that this evening, Derek. We've got three things we're going to talk to you specifically about, which are going to help you navigate the executive job market more successfully. Welcome, Monica from Dallas, our first attendee on the line from the US. And I believe that's Elizabeth's hometown as well. So we'll introduce her shortly. Andrew's saying interested to hear a perspective from the US on employability skills. Okay, good. So we're on the hour, and we'll get off to a good start. So tonight we're going to be talking about transatlantic advice on finding success in the executive job market, and this is a co-presented event. It's going to be run by me with Elizabeth, who I'll introduce to you shortly, and just before we get into the meat of the content, we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping. We've done a little bit of this already. If you could just type in the box that you can hear me and that you can see the presentation, you should see a screen that says housekeeping on. If you could just type in the box to let me know you can see that, that will be fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. Okay, all good. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome, Mike. Okay, everyone's coming in the room now, which is great. Using a system called GoToWebinar, pretty robust system, used it many times. Occasionally there can be a problem. This is what happens with technology. So if for any reason you get kicked out of the system or we disappear, please don't worry. Use the link that you got in your email, and we'll all log back in and we'll all be back in the same place. And you've all found the question box, which is great. What we're going to do tonight, because there's a dual presenters here, we'll probably deal with all of the questions at the end. But if you've got a question as we go through and you think, do you know what, I really need to ask that question, and you don't want to wait till the end, pop it in the question box. We'll come back to it if we don't deal with it then, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. This is not a recording, this is a live webinar, and Elizabeth and I have agreed to stick around to make sure we deal with as many questions as possible. And Andrew's asking how long you're running for. Good question. We plan to run for an hour this evening, so about 45 minutes of content, give or take a few minutes, and then around 15 minutes, 20 minutes of questions. But we'll stick around if there's a few more questions. So on that note, let's move on. And what's the promise this evening? Well, this evening we're going to be talking about three things. First thing we're going to talk about is how to increase the probability of finding the executive position you want. Because in the executive job market, it is a game of probability. There is no certainty. There's people on both sides of the transaction. So what we're going to talk to you about is how you increase the probability of you being the one that stands out to be ultimately the one that gets hired. We're then going to talk to you about how to get the attention of executive recruiters. As an ex-recruiter, I lived in this world for quite a period of time. I'm going to show you how to do this to make sure that you're the one that gets shortlisted. Because if you're using your job search strategy to get in front of executive recruiters and using executive recruiters to find your next position, then if you don't make the shortlist, well, you don't make the grades. So it's really important to get on that shortlist, and we'll talk to you about how to do that as well. And then finally, we're going to talk to you about how to build a professional network to identify executive career opportunities both now and in the future. And the advice very much here will be that in the executive job market, this is not a stop-start affair. This is about building a professional network ongoing, whether you're in the executive job market or not. But we'll talk to you more about that as we get to it. And then, of course, we've got the live Q&A. So I'm going to take a little break. I'm going to ask Elizabeth. Welcome, Elizabeth. You're on the line this evening, hopefully.
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me, Simon. Good to be here.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, a very warm welcome to you all the way from Dallas. I'm going to hand over to you to do your own introduction and tell us a bit about you and where you're from, what you're all about.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. I'm the author of a couple of books. The first one was called Recession Proof Yourself, which was launched in 2009 during the Great Recession of the United States. This book was for job seekers that had lost their jobs during recession. The second book I launched in 2012, and it was aptly titled, I Quit, Working for You Isn't Working for Me. This book was written for the survivors of recession. So these are typically people that are on a confidential job search, perhaps an executive job search, and they want to understand the job market and also the best strategy and the best approach into the market. And then this year I have a third book coming out on leadership. It will be about women's leadership, and that's either going to launch this year or early next year. But it is already penned and about to be released. I also have a radio show called Leadership Lessons from the Lioness. It's on Plaid for Women. And then I'm a writer in quite a few publications. So you can certainly find my work. I'm out there. And the best place to find me is on my website at elizabethlyons.com.
Fantastic. Thanks, Elizabeth. And I should tell a story about how Elizabeth and I got together, because it illustrates the third thing we're going to talk about this evening, which is building a professional network. So I think I'd read one of Elizabeth's articles on her LinkedIn page, and I'd made a comment. I'd commented about it. I thought it was good, commented on it, and she acknowledged me. I was writing my book at the time, my second book, and we had a little bit of dialogue. Then I think you watched me, did you, for 6 months, Elizabeth, to check me out and see what I was all about. Is that right?
Yes, I did for probably 6, maybe 9 months. Yeah, I watched all your posts come through on LinkedIn. I read your updates. Yes, I did.
Fantastic. And built that relationship. I didn't necessarily know Elizabeth was watching, but when the time was right and when we built that trust by understanding what we both stood for in terms of the advice we were giving, Elizabeth reached out to me. We came up with this idea to do this transatlantic event. Don't really see anybody else doing this, and thought, well, what a good idea to compare thinking from both sides of the Atlantic. So that's really how it all started. I'm going to do a very quick introduction. There's a few of you that I know on the line, so you may have heard this before. My name's Simon Gray. I'm based in the UK. I trained initially as a chartered accountant, but not really wanting to pursue that career having qualified, I fell into the recruitment industry. So I went to work for a recruitment business specialising in finance recruitment. At the time, worked as a consultant for 5 years. I then took a quite drastic career break, and I went overseas to Japan for 2 years and trained in martial arts with the Tokyo Riot Police in Aikido, which was a fantastic experience. But ended up coming back to the UK. Started a business, my own recruitment business, in September 2008. Possibly the worst time to start a business, but literally we started this business 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed, but grew this business over 5 years, and I decided to exit it back in 2013. And the reason I decided to do that is because I'd written my first book, Super Secrets of the Successful Job Seeker, and I'd written that because I knew as a recruiter that everyone that came into my office I would never place. It's impossible. No recruiter will place everybody they meet, and I wanted to give my clients, or my candidates I should say, my candidates, something to go away with that would help them navigate the job market for themselves based on the knowledge and experience I'd gained through 10 years in the industry. This led to my second book, Super Secrets of Successful Executive Job Search, and based on the books and the feedback I got, people started to ask me, well, will you work with me one-to-one to help me navigate the job market successfully? So what I do now, I work with executives from all over the world through my business career Codex. And my offering really is threefold, and this links with my martial arts background, because I describe myself, as you'll see on the LinkedIn profile, as a trainer, coach and cornerman. Trainer, providing the education as to how the exec job market really works. Coach, to provide motivation, accountability, and to keep people on track during the inevitable ups and downs that you will experience. And cornerman, because when you're in the thick of the fight in the executive job market, you can't always see what's happening around you. So that's a very important part of the service, to be there in the fight to help people navigate, to do what they need to do every single step of the way. So we're going to talk first off, and I'm going to hand back to Elizabeth to kick off with this. We're going to talk first about how to increase the probability of finding the executive position you want. So Elizabeth, over to you for this one, please.
All right. Well, in my private practice, the biggest thing that I see with executives is they have a difficulty getting out of cyberspace. So they're applying to ads online and they don't hear back. And this is typically manager, director, or vice president level. And I think the biggest issue is, how do I get seen? Because if I can get the interview, I do fine. I usually walk away with, a second interview and a third interview and possibly an offer. So the way that you increase your probability to get out of cyberspace, some of it's very simple. Some of it just boils down to follow-up. A lot of what I see in the executive job search, it's who you know, other individuals within the company, other executives within a confidential job search, or perhaps they were laid off and they're in a job search. For some reason, the executive mindset is a bit, they like to be quiet about their job search. They don't necessarily want to share leads because they're afraid that there's going to be competition for the same role. And what I've found in my practice in 15 years is the more that you expand, share leads, share information around companies, the more powerful you become in your job search, and you're actually able to uncover job opportunities that are clearly there, but you can't get at them because your resume is stuck in the ad response of some recruiter. The second thing you want to do is try to get the attention of an executive recruiter, and how you go about doing that is a couple of ways. One is pick up the phone. I think so much is done online that we've lost the connection, that the bits and bytes that are coming across an email are a real person. And if you know of an executive search firm, like in the United States, Korn Ferry is a good one, pick up the phone, call the firm, ask them flat out, do you place executives at my level? When was the last time? These are the 5 companies I'm trying to get into. Do you represent them? Do a little bit of investigative and decide if you want to work with that executive recruiter, because they are specialized. Simon mentioned a couple minutes ago, he came from an accounting background, and then he went off and ended up placing accountants in an accountant-driven firm. He placed, CFOs, controllers, etc. So they're specialized. Not every recruiter can help you or will help you. So you've got to make sure that they actually deal with your specialty and or your industry where you're an executive. The third piece I would say is go where you know. If there's a posting out there, then that's a vacant job. That's an opportunity. That means they added to headcount, somebody quit, or somebody was fired. It's that simple. Otherwise, there would be no posting. So start there, and then start to work a tiered approach. And your tiered approach is 5 to 7 companies that you would like to work for, and a networking strategy that you can put together. Your networking strategy is people that you know, people that you don't know, people through associations, executives like I had mentioned in job search and other areas. Get together a good strategy for your networking. When you get to networking, then you're going to see if they know any of the people in the target list and or the places where you have applied. And that's how you begin to get out of the cyberspace area. The other simple way to get out of cyberspace and get your resume seen by the decision maker would simply be by contacting somebody or knowing somebody within that organization and saying, hey, I saw a posting over at Microsoft, or hey, I saw a posting over at Dell. I know you work there. Could you figure out who the hiring manager is and walk my resume right in there? Please tell them that I'm interested in the position. That's another way to get it right out of cyberspace. So again, get it out of email, become a person, pick up the phone, go to networking events, shake hands, and keep track of how your networking is growing and develop. How is that networking actually expanding? What have you seen in terms of your clients, Simon?
Well, first off, I'd say that's great advice to get out of cyberspace. I think cyberspace is a route to market, it's a route to the decision maker. But as an ex-recruiter, how many candidates did I place that I'd never met? Well, very, very, very few indeed, because my clients expected me to meet my candidates. It was all part of the service. So, picking up the phone, getting in front of the recruiter, getting in front of the decision maker direct, is absolutely spot on advice. I mean, I think it's all about standing out. And if you go online and you Google how do I get ahead in the job market, the advice you tend to get is stand out. But not many people tell you how to do it. And for me, you have to look at what everybody else is doing to think about what you might do differently. And there's a quote by Einstein which says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I love this quote, and I apply it to the job market to say, well, actually, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing as everybody else and expecting to be the one that gets hired. So most people in the executive job space, the first thing they think about is their CV, and they'll post their CV online, they'll place their CV with executive recruiters, and then they sit and wait, and they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And over a period of time, because time is an important factor, time is a very important factor in terms of being motivated and how we feel about our position in the executive job market. If they don't get a response within a period of time, it can have a real negative consequence to their ability to really believe in their skills and their power to find their next executive position. So what I advise is, before you even consider the CV, to stand out, you've got to understand how the job market environment works, who the people are, how employers make decisions, and then you have to understand your own psychology. And also, you need to plan. You need to plan where you're going. The most difficult candidate for me to place was the one that said to me, do you know what, Simon? I can do anything. Just get me in front of the employer. I can do anything. Because I didn't know how to position them, and they didn't know how to position themselves. And I knew if I put them in an interview, because their message wasn't unique, it wasn't niche, it didn't necessarily appeal to what that client was looking for because it was too general, they tended to stay on the books and not get placed. So that's also important advice. So don't try and stand for everything. Stand for something. Otherwise, you stand for nothing. So
Simon, I'd like to add something to that, because I think you've got a real point there. I actually gave a presentation a couple months ago to a room full of 50 executives, and I said something to that effect. And I said, you want to stand out, but you don't want to be like weird and purple, right? You don't want to stand out in a bad way, but you definitely want to stand out. And I think it's important. One of my clients very recently read a couple of my books, and even though he was at the executive level, he was in a job search out of state, right? So he was in Michigan, and he was thinking, really my skill set is plentiful in California. He actually got on a plane, went to a conference, met some people, and then he took a stack of resumes and very targeted dropped them off at companies, which was one of the suggestions I gave in one of my books. He said he literally dropped it off with the reception at the front desk, and he was strolling across the parking lot, and his phone rang, and they scheduled a face-to-face interview because he was in town right there and then. So that's a great example of standing out but not being weird. I mean, that's very unusual that somebody would physically show up at a conference, network, drop some resumes off, plant some seeds, and then plan to get on a plane. But it worked. And I think that's what it's about. How can you do it and do it different but still be professional? What I find is most executives, the obstacle is really their thoughts around the process. So they don't like it. They don't like rejection. They don't like not hearing back. They start to get angry and frustrated when they get 6 to 12 months into a search that's well over 6 figures in their comp, and that starts to bleed through in the search. So it is important to kind of harness the emotions around it and to constantly be thinking, about possibilities as opposed to, some of the negativity that can creep up in the job search.
Absolutely, spot on. And as we move into the next thing we're going to discuss about how to get the attention of executive recruiters, just before I get into contingent versus retained search, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the executive job market works, because employers make decisions, and I've met a lot of employers over the years. They make decisions through what I call these 3 conversations. And what people tend to do is, when they're looking to hire, they'll have a conversation with their peer group, So a CFO may talk to other CFOs and say, well, who do you know? Who can you recommend for my organisation? If they get nowhere then, they'll have a second conversation with extended networks. So these could be people in their industry space that they know. It could be suppliers, it could be financial advisors, it could be anybody, accountants. And they say, who do you know? Who do you know? And the reason they do this is because recruitment can be painful. And we all like to feel secure in the recruitment decision that we make. And if you ask somebody that you trust, if they know somebody, there tends to be an implicit recommendation there. Because if somebody asks me, well, can you recommend somebody? I'm not going to recommend anyone bad because it's going to reflect badly on me. So before anybody comes to a recruiter or places an executive job on a job board, there is a high probability that they will have done this. And I call this space the hidden market. And the hidden market is really where high probability opportunities exist. And this is exactly what Elizabeth is talking about. You know, if you approach a company directly because you have an interest in that company, it's not necessarily recruiting, you've not seen an advert, you're getting ahead of the market and you're getting to that company before they go out and talk to recruiters. You might be a little bit early, but they will remember you and they might just invite you in for a meeting, which could turn into an interview at that moment, or it could turn into an executive job further down the track. So playing in the hidden market is extremely important. Let's talk about exec recruiters. So there are two types of recruitment out there. There's contingent recruitment and retained search. And many of you will be familiar with this term. Contingent basically is a recruitment company that goes out to market. They will probably be recruiting for a client alongside other recruiters. So there could be three recruitment businesses trying to fill one opportunity. They tend to have a big database. They're constantly looking to top this database up. So this is the kind of business that you can go and knock on the door. They'll meet you without a specific vacancy necessarily to talk to you about, because they're stacking the shelves for when they do have that kind of vacancy. Retained search tends to apply more to the executive job market, and these are search and selection firms, headhunters. You may have heard this terminology, and this market works slightly differently, because these recruitment businesses, they will work with a select group of clients, can be very specialized, as Elizabeth said earlier. That's absolutely true, can be very specialized, and they have a database, but because they get the job opportunity, the executive job opportunity on their own, they charge a proportion of the fee up front to secure it. They spend an extended period of time going out to the market and looking who's on the market, but also looking at what I call passive candidates. So these are people that aren't necessarily on the market, but could be right for the opportunity. And it's a very different space. Trying to get in front of retained search firms, search and selection firms, can be more difficult. One of the ways you can get their attention, however, is through the medium of LinkedIn, because search and selection firms are on LinkedIn all the time. It's their primary database now to find out who's doing what and who's doing what for whom, and who might be relevant for their clients' businesses. I've just advised a business here in the UK, and they are using an executive search firm. I advise them on which firm to use, and this executive search firm, as part of their pitch to this business, was, we have great connectivity and great interrogation skills on LinkedIn. So if you're not on LinkedIn, you could be missing the opportunity to be approached about passive jobs that you wouldn't necessarily see because you've not applied for these jobs. And you need to be on there, communicating on there in a way that positions yourself in front of the people that could potentially want to find you. And professional headline on LinkedIn is very important. What I would be looking for as a former recruiter, I'd want to know what this person's job was, their current job. I'd want to know what sector they were in. I'd want to know kind of the size of the business that they'd worked for, and I'd want to see a professional photo, because I wanted to get a sense of that person. And this is one of the reasons that LinkedIn, in my opinion, is more powerful now than a paper CV or a digital version of your CV, because it has the ability, through the photo and various other things you can do on the platform, to convey personality and stuff that's not just text-based, that shows what you can do, not what you've just done in the past. So it's very, very powerful tool. Secondly, you have to understand a recruiter's motivations, and recruiters are in business to make money. They're commercial organisations. when they meet a candidate, they are making an instant decision: is this candidate convertible into a fee now or very soon in the future? And if you're not, for whatever reason, then you can sit on a database, or you may not get a call back. Doesn't mean you're a bad candidate. What it means is you're just not right at that point in time. So you have to think about which recruiters you're approaching. A sector-based approach is important. So if you're in finance, approach a finance boutique recruiter. If you're in manufacturing, approach a manufacturing specialist, because you're more likely to get your message heard, and they're more likely to have jobs specific to your skills and experience right there, right now. So when you approach a recruiter, understanding their motivations, recognize that it's nothing personal if they don't call you back. They just haven't realized that you have value for them at that point in time. One of the other things that is important to realize with a recruiter, they think in probability terms. So they have a client that they're representing, and they need to shortlist candidates for that client. If you turn up and talk to an executive recruiter and tell them that you're registered with 20 other executive search firms, the probability of them placing you is suddenly 1 in 20. If you turn up and talk to an executive recruiter and say, I've done my research, I realise you are the best guys in my opinion in the marketplace, I'm talking to you and one other, suddenly that probability is increased to 50%. So they're going to put more effort into placing you, because you become more likely to be converted into a placement. It's not 1 in 20, it's 1 in 2. So a lot of executive candidates that I've worked with, when they first come to me, they're talking to 20, 30 recruitment firms, and we narrow that down to a select few and build a proper relationship with those businesses. And if you're registered with too many businesses, because you won't be able to think offhand who those organizations are. So narrow the field, become more specialist, and you'll get a better response. So executive job seeker dichotomy, what's this all about? So when people approach an executive search firm, often the message is just about, well, I need a job, I need my next executive position. And that's the message everybody else delivers. You can imagine a recruiter sat in their office, they're getting phone calls, they're getting emails, and it's the same message: can you help me with a job? Can you help me find my next executive position? So imagine if you're the person that approaches in a slightly different way. So your first conversation with this recruiter is not just about you needing a job, it's about how you can help them. It's about how you can build a relationship with them that's mutually beneficial. And many executive recruiters have never worked in the sector that they recruit for. I was different. I'd worked in finance, recruited in finance, but many haven't. So one of the things you can do is offer to help them, educate them on the sector, help them understand who some of the key players are, what some of the key skills mean, because every sector has its own terminology. And the other thing you can do to build rapport, which rarely people do, is you can recommend others to them, people that you know to them. And also you can recommend their services to people at the senior level, perhaps in other businesses that might need to recruit. And the last point is really about the long-term relationship. So I said earlier that the recruiters are looking to see whether you're convertible into a recruitment fee. If you go with a message to a recruiter that says, do you know what, I understand how the exec job market works, I understand how you guys think and work, if you look after me now and help me find my next executive position, what I will do when I get into that position, I will come back to you and use your services to recruit additional senior people into my team. Because when people move into new exec positions, quite often the first thing they do is they rationalize the team, make changes to the team. We used to call it backfill in recruitment. We used to call this, we used to think about not only the job that they're going to, changing the team there, but also the backfill of the job that they've come from. So what you can also do, having been placed, is to help the recruiter backfill your job, the job you've just left. So there's backfill and forward fill. Forward fill, of course, is the changes you make to the team having gone into your next role. So it's really about having a different message to the competition when you go and talk to executive recruiters. Elizabeth, what would you say on that?
Well, I would agree with all of that. I think the piece that I would like to add here, and it's very difficult for an executive to hear this, but all of you look the same on paper. I mean, I know that you're very accomplished. You've spent 20, 25 years doing what you do, but I will tell you, in 15 years of doing this work, when I post an ad for a director level or above, director, senior director, vice president, recently I just posted an ad and I got 50 applications in 14 business days. And all of them read the same. The profile is the same at the top. You all have advanced degrees. You all have the same number of years experience. And so, you get to the point where you pick the top that are, written the best or maybe even a little bit different that catch your eye, and you pick up the phone and you call the candidate, because there's a point at your level where it's not your experience that's going to get you the job, and it's not your experience that's going to engage me as a recruiter. What's going to engage me is the chemistry. Are you a right fit for the position? I know that's used a lot in the United States, but it's chemistry, because once you're qualified, you're going to want to think about what's your wow factor. What's going to separate you out? What makes you a little bit more competitive in the job market, and be able to convey that very succinctly to a recruiter. Simon's right. The recruiter is not your friend. The recruiter is going to bill a percentage of your annual salary. It's a business relationship, and you get to choose if you want to work for them and have them place you or not. So remember that in the relationship. You can take your skill set anywhere you want. If you're not comfortable working with a particular executive recruiter, find another one. But you've got to know your wow factor. You've got to be able to explain to them where you're going to stand out above the other candidates on their desk.
Absolutely. And what I'd say on that as well is that, once you get past the CV, you're in the door, you're in the interview process. Really what it boils down to, and this is whether you're interviewing with a recruiter who may be doing first round, or you're actually directly in front of the employer. What it really boils down to is the experience that you give the employer or the recruiter in your presence, how comfortable you make them feel. Because as Elizabeth said, if candidates have been shortlisted for a particular vacancy, they've got similar skills and experience that just comes from different businesses. But what about the experience that the candidate gives the employer at the interview? Because employers aren't always used to interviewing, particularly at the senior end of the market. That's what they're going to make their decision on, gut feel, at the end of the day. So it's an important thing to think about. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about building a professional network, and I'm going to hand back to you, Elizabeth, to kick us off with this, please.
Sure, absolutely. So the other biggest obstacle I find with executives that are in search is that they are absolutely experts in their field. They spend 50, 60, 70 hours a week at work. They do a phenomenal job, and then they realize they don't have a network, because who has time to go to industry networking meetings or to even network with their peers when they're working 50, 60, 70 hours a week? And so when they do decide to do a job search, in this market in the United States, we're in a bull market, so there's a lot of confidential job seekers out there. What they find is they don't have much of a network. And on the flip side, if they've been in a role for 10 or 15 years and are suddenly laid off, it's devastating. And they don't have a network. And then it becomes a case of, well, how do I even build this? First I was worried about finding a job and replacing a large income in my family. Now I'm worried about I don't have a network to fall back on. So the networking is important, especially if you're working. You always want to keep it exercised and organized. My own LinkedIn is a living, breathing thing, as I call it. I really do know all 1,000+ people that are personally connected to me in LinkedIn. I know who my clients are, my readers are, and at any time I could reach out to them and say, hey, I know you work at ABC Company, and I have a client that's trying to get in there. May I give you a virtual introduction, and would the two of you network? And that's how you do it. That's how you begin to build that network and exercise it. Treat it as a living, breathing thing, particularly your LinkedIn. So I think the first question when we talk about networking is, who is your network? And I find that a lot of executives have a hard time answering that question. They'll think it's just in their LinkedIn, or it's just some of the colleagues that they worked with, say 5-10 years ago. But your network is actually much larger than that if you choose to expand it. Your network is literally, the people that you know at at the gym. You go there every day, day in and day out. Where do they work? What do they do? People at church, people at temple. There's networking opportunities there. Your next door neighbor, right across the street from me, is a vice president of IT of American Airlines. I mean, he's a part of my network. So your network is much larger than you think, and you want to start to think about who you know and spidering that out, because that's what's going to allow you to uncover the opportunities. That's what's going to allow you to see a posting and then look at your resume and contact somebody and say, hey, I applied, but could you walk this in? That's what you want to think about, is who do you know? When I was doing executive recruiting at the CFO level in the United States, when I looked at somebody's resume and I decided to represent them, I would instantly think, who do I know? Who do I know? Who do I know? They're coming out of this industry with this experience. Who do I know in the other companies that I could pick up the phone and market this candidate into this client? It's the same way when you're in job search. So when you're applying to postings, who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Ask yourself those kinds of questions. And you'll be amazed at how big your network can become within just 30 or 60 days. What do you find, Simon, when you're working with your clients?
Yeah, it's great advice. Well, I want to talk a little bit about LinkedIn, because a lot of my clients, when they first come to me, they realize that they probably need to be on LinkedIn. Some are a bit nervous about it. They may believe it's Facebook for business people, but actually it's the most important professional tool that you have now, whether you're in looking for a job or whether you're just in business, because pretty much everyone I know in business, they check each other out on LinkedIn before even doing business. So when people first come to me, they tend to be using what I call LinkedIn as a shop window. So they've created this profile which talks about their skills and experience, and it, to a certain extent, is in line with their CV, but then they don't do anything with it. And one of the catalysts for my first book was asking senior execs that came into my office, okay, you've got your LinkedIn profile, what are you doing with it now? And sometimes they'd look at me blankly and say, well, what do you mean? Doesn't it just sit there? Don't people just find it? Well, the answer to that is no. And you have to use LinkedIn proactively. And I call this using LinkedIn as a proactive engagement tool. And the analogy here is, if you think of LinkedIn as your storefront, your shop front, if you just stay in your store, well, you're going to get some passing customers who may or may not come in. But if you go out of your store onto the high street or into the mall and you bring people in, well, you're going to get more attention and more potential customers. And using that analogy for job search, you're going to get more potential recruiters or employers taking you seriously and looking at your profile. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. One of the really powerful things on LinkedIn is groups. So you have the ability to join 50 groups on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn's advice is, if you can do it on LinkedIn, do it, because it increases your searchability on the platform. Because LinkedIn is essentially it's a website. And it's looking to provide the most relevant search results for its customers. So it's going to provide completed profiles. So if you haven't got 50 LinkedIn groups that you're a member of, then have a think about doing it. Now, the distinction is here. You can't operate in 50 LinkedIn groups, but you might pick 10 of those 50 to really engage and have conversations in. And the LinkedIn groups will have an industry-specific focus. There'll be a place where people are talking about things pertinent to the industry, giving advice on things in the industry. And guess what? When an executive recruiter or an employer is looking to hire, rather than searching the whole of LinkedIn, well, they're going to go to the groups. I had a senior position, this is some years ago now, with a big international manufacturing company. I needed somebody quite specialist. It was a senior audit role. And I didn't search the whole of LinkedIn. I went to a group on LinkedIn that specialised and had conversations in it with internal auditors, and posted in there. I got 5 candidates, and one of those candidates got the job and is still in that business today. So you have to be proactive in positioning yourself properly on LinkedIn. The other thing that people don't really think about when it comes to building a network is something I call market makers. Now, I talked about the hidden market earlier. You can go direct to the hidden market. These are employers you want to work for. You go to them before they talk to recruiters, whether they're advertising or not. But market makers are well-connected individuals within an industry sector or space. And they're really powerful connectors because they tend to run business organizations. They are the vocal person, the specialist in a particular industry sector. And rather than going to individual businesses directly yourself, if you build a relationship with a market maker, well, when an employer is looking to hire, who do they go and talk to? I've already said they talk to their peer group and their professional networks. So, market maker is a perfect person to build a relationship with because they're well connected in your industry space. And I run a business group here in the UK. We have about 230 business organisations in our group, and I get asked on a regular basis, who do you know who could do this? Who do you know who could do that? But how many people have approached me, built a relationship with me because they're looking for their next position? I can tell you not many at all. And this is the power of market makers. And they exist in the physical world and also the cyber world. But as Elizabeth said at the very open of our online event this evening, of course your aim is, while you may engage in the cyberspace, you ultimately want to get a face-to-face meeting. And the last thing I wanted to say on this is linked to marketing and how marketing used to be done and is done nowadays. And if you think about how marketing used to be done, what people used to do is companies used to put adverts out there, buy my product, buy my service, and hope that we as consumers would take note and buy. But of course we all get bombarded nowadays, and we have a filter, so we've switched this filter on to say, do you know what, I don't want to be sold to anymore. And if you think about when you go out to the job market with a message which is solely I need a job, essentially it's selling, and people have switched off to that. So it no longer works to go to market and say, here's my CV, hire me. It just doesn't work. And modern marketeers have realized this, and if you look at how modern organizations market themselves, they've introduced a couple of other steps between the see me, buy me, or see me, hire me in terms of the job market. And I call this see me, like me, trust me, hire me. So using LinkedIn as an example, you have an opportunity to publish posts on LinkedIn. You have the opportunity to comment and communicate on LinkedIn. If you do this in the right place on LinkedIn, people will start to see you, like what you're saying, start to trust what you're saying, and when the time comes to make a hiring decision or an introduction decision, they've built a relationship with you. You may not know they're there building a relationship with you, but you're the person that they go to. And this can take time, and this is part of the problem sometimes, because we like to get instantaneous results. We like to know if we do this, we'll get that. But when it comes to executive job search and building that see me, like me, trust me, hire me relationship, in cyberspace it takes time. It can take 6 months, 9 months, and it's about consistency. In the real physical world, it can take time. If you go to a networking event, you're not going to find a job there on day one. It's very unlikely. But if you build a relationship with the organizer of the event and get to know people at that event, you build a relationship over time so that they start to trust you, and when an opportunity presents itself in the hidden market, well, you're the person that they introduce. And Andrew on the line, I picked this comment up because he said this earlier. He said, process, not prize. And that's what it is. Executive job search is a process. You have the end goal in mind, but you have to keep the process going consistently, showing up each and every day, doing the right things in the right places, and trusting in the fact that if you continue to do that, the right opportunity will present itself. The one thing you don't know is exactly when that will happen, but if you do it consistently, it will. So anything else to add to that, Elizabeth, before we start to take some questions, which I think are coming in thick and fast?
I think you hit on something, and I'd like to cover that again. You talked about consistency, and I talk about this with my clients all the time. I'll get a call and somebody will say, I'm having a hard time in the job market. I've been looking for 6 months. And the first question I ask is, well, what are you doing? And they're like, what do you mean? Well, what are you doing every day? You wake up in the morning, what are you doing? Because I'm trying to get my head around what's their process. What are they doing on a consistent basis? The other complaint I get is, I got a bunch of calls and now it's summer, I'm not getting calls. But what you'll find is they're not consistent. So what I say is you're getting the results of exactly what you've done. You start, stop in the job search. A lot of times, you put the resume out there and then things get a little better at work. Well, I can hang on here a little bit more. And you get some calls, you do some phone interviews, then it dries up. Then work explodes again, and you're like, I got to get another job. I got to get out of here. And so you start stop, and what you get in the market is that result. It starts stops on you. So Simon's absolutely right. Time and consistency actually gives you the result. And it's difficult for executives because they're result driven. And I will tell you, the job market is not like that. Your success is measured in getting the applications out. Your success is showing up and suiting up and doing the work, not the phone call to interview, not the job offer. Your success is in the consistency of the activity, and most importantly, the quality of your activity. If you are rude to an American recruiter in the job search, it's over. I will tell you, it's over. I don't know how it works in the rest of the world, but
same in the UK.
One rude email, and you're done. You just blew the opportunity at Apple, Dell, Google, wherever you were banging on the door. So consistency, time and consistency, quality of the relationships, quality of the networking, we're all connected. You're not in this alone. You got to get in the rhythm. You've got to get in the flow and be a part of it.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. It's one of the revelations that my clients have when we come to the end of the program that I put them through is, wow, I need to keep this network thing going now. And they're absolutely right, because you can't do this stop-start. When you need it, you've got to have built it. And if you build it when you don't need a job, then you build it in a more authentic way. And you're just connecting with people to build relationships. And people can tell that. And you built that relationship over a 3, 6, 9 month period by being consistent and communicating, so that when you need it, it's there for you to leverage. And LinkedIn, is a really powerful tool for you to do that. And on that note, just before we take some questions, what we said this evening is we would share our LinkedIn profiles with you. And if you'd like to connect to Elizabeth or I'm just going to drop the our LinkedIn profiles into the box. Just let me know if you could see that. That would be really handy. Everyone should be seeing this right now. I'm just dropping Elizabeth's in there as we speak, because one of the powerful things on LinkedIn is reach. So do you have a game of do you have Conkers in the US, Elizabeth? Do you play that game? Do you remember that game?
I don't play it, but we might have it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, for those of you in the States who may be not familiar with this, it's a game that people play in the autumn. Kids play it at school. It comes off an oak tree. It's a little nut. You put a string through it and you try and smash the other person's conker. And if I've got a conker that's beaten 50 conkers and you've got one that's beaten 100, Elizabeth, and I beat you, I get your 100. Okay, and that's how LinkedIn works. So we're putting our LinkedIn profiles in there. I've got 5,000 connections on LinkedIn. If you connect to me, then you're going to get 5,000 second tier connections in one hit, and similarly for Elizabeth. So if you'd like to connect to us, feel free. We'll accept your connections if you've been on the webinar this evening, and drop us a line afterwards and let us know what you thought, because we're always keen to get some feedback. So I'm going to ask people now. I'm going to throw open the floor. We're actually on time. That's really good. To see if anyone's got any questions. Has anyone got any questions? Andrew's correcting me. It's not an oak tree. It's a horse chestnut tree. Absolutely, Andrew. You are spot on. I need to brush up on my trees.
Andrew, I might be in trouble. I don't even know if we have those trees in the United States, let alone Dallas, Texas. I need to do some research and get back to you, sir.
Well, it's a good job we're not talking about trees this evening. We're actually talking about something we know a lot about. Okay, we've got an interesting question come in, Elizabeth, and I'm not quite sure I understand it. It's coming from James, who said, should I hang a shingle? Not quite sure what that means. Should I hang a shingle or consult while I'm looking for a full-time job? I think that could be some US terminology. Do you want to enlighten us?
Yes, I do. So in the United States, the term hanging a shingle means, starting your own consulting business, starting your own small business. What you find, and what I've seen with CFOs or other executives is, let's say they're unemployed, and they're in a job search for anything north of 6 months, right? 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and they don't have a job yet, and they'll say, well, should I start a little consulting business? Should I hang a shingle and just do some work, not necessarily pro bono, but do some work And I always say, yeah, absolutely. Do a little consulting. It keeps your skills sharp. You could go in to a company on a project base, a small project base, 10 hours a week for a month or two. And who knows, it could turn into a full-time position. So, I think if you're unemployed, which is a little unlikely in this market, but if you're unemployed a period of time and you're an executive, yeah, absolutely. Start a little consulting business. Now you don't have a big dead spot on your resume saying your job ended in 2015 or what have you. You add this line item, ABC LLC or ABC Consulting or whatever, and line or two about what you're doing, and now you're officially look employed, and you're keeping your skills sharp, and you're bringing in a little extra money. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think it's also an opportunity for networking, isn't it? And I was talking to one of my clients about this the other day. In fact, a couple of my clients recently who are in my Executive Edge program, and they said, should I do some consulting while I'm kind of waiting for the right opportunity to come along? And I said absolutely, because you get to network, and also from a psychological perspective, you're out of the house every day. But what you have to be careful of, you've got to still protect the time while you're doing some consulting to invest the time to get your next opportunity, the opportunity that you really, really want. So great question. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, James. Just before we take the next question, I'm just dropping a couple of links into the box. Can everyone see those? I put the LinkedIn. If you just let us know. Okay, so Andrew has asked a good question. So you can see the links. When you connect with people on LinkedIn that you don't necessarily know, there's a number of different defaults that you can select: friend, this, that, and the other. Sometimes people want the email address to allow you to do it. What I tend to do, and I've done a webinar on this, which is on my YouTube channel, is I connect to people and say we've done business together, but I use a personal message to do it. Because if you just do that without the personal message, well, we haven't necessarily done business together. But if I include a personal message that explains why I'm getting in touch, then generally, as far as my experience is concerned, I don't tend to have a problem. But I've just popped Elizabeth's email address in there, so you can use that if you wanted to pick one of the other defaults. What Elizabeth and I agreed to do, for any of you on the line that think, do you know what, I'd like to talk to somebody about some of the things that I know I need to do that I'm not doing, or I'd like to talk to myself or Elizabeth about maybe one of our executive career coaching programs, what we agreed to do, with no obligation on your part, to have an initial 15-minute diagnostic call. If you'd like to book one with me, the link I've just popped in the box will give you direct access to my schedule in your time zone. And if you'd like to have a chat with Elizabeth about setting something up similar, there's her email address there in the chat box too. Elizabeth, I'm just going to ask you about that, because that was a good question Andy raised. So if you want to connect to somebody on LinkedIn that you don't know, you've not spoken to before, and you click on the connect, you're not using a paid for service on LinkedIn, what's your advice in terms of what you click and how you connect? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yes, actually, I wrote an article about that a few years ago, and if you follow me on LinkedIn, you can find that. It's called How Do I Connect with Someone on LinkedIn That I Don't Know? I think it's really critical that you have the right attitude and the right approach, especially if you're looking for something like a job, or you see they work at some place and you want to know somebody there. Typically people are connecting with you because they want something. So if it's your turn and you want something, your approach in LinkedIn is critical, because on any given day I probably get 15 blind, hey, I'd like to connect with you, Elizabeth, on LinkedIn. And I've got to tell you, and I'm probably going to revisit my policy around this, I don't connect to everyone, because my LinkedIn really is people that I know, or it is my readers, or it is my clients. So if it's just blind and you're just coming to me saying, hey, I'd like to connect, I'm not as inclined to let you into my LinkedIn and possibly mine all my contacts, frankly. So, if I have to connect to somebody I don't know, I flat out say, hi, Andrew, you and I have never met before. My name is Elizabeth Lyons. The purpose of my email is blah, blah, blah. Best regards, Elizabeth. I would be direct, I would be very professional, and I would be really polite, because you don't know them. But it doesn't mean that they won't help you, particularly if if your approach is professional and warm, frankly.
Totally agree. I have a slightly different strategy on LinkedIn. I have a one chance policy. So I will pretty much connect to anybody on LinkedIn because I'm using LinkedIn for business development purposes, to increase reach for my business. And I know that the more connections I have, the more reach I have. But if somebody starts to message me inappropriately, they start to try and sell me stuff, they're spamming me, then I just disconnect from them. I'll give you a really bad example of an approach I've had over the last couple of days. This is somebody I'm connected to, I don't know personally, who sent me a message through LinkedIn to say, can you connect me to such and such? No please, no explanation as to why, and they've done this twice over the last 2 days. And I've not disconnected yet, but that is an approach that doesn't curry favour. They've also done something which does curry favour, which is why they're still in the network, which is they've endorsed me for certain skills. So you have to treat every individual as unique, and if somebody violates your policy on LinkedIn, then of course there's an opportunity to disconnect. If you want to protect your connections, so if you want to protect people who are connected to you from seeing your other connections, you can do that in the privacy settings. And most recruiters that I know tend to do that because they know their competitors will be looking at, well, who should I be talking to? It's not technically in the spirit of LinkedIn and what it's all about, but you'll find that a lot of exec recruiters do that to protect their connections and contacts. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. This is great. I love doing the Q&A, and it proves that this webinar is live, and this is where often we get some of the gems in terms of questions and the advice that we can give. So let's have a look. What have we got? Any other questions? Okay, so Andrew has asked a related question. Thanks, Andrew. You got a lot of questions tonight, which is good. Should you say what your policy for connecting is on your profile? Well, some people do, and you'll see sometimes in people's professional headline they describe themselves as lion, Lion. This doesn't mean they're an aggressive animal that's in the zoo or in Africa or wherever else. What it means is that they're a LinkedIn open networker. So they're saying publicly, if you connect to me, I will connect back to you. What do you think on that, Elizabeth? Should you say somewhere on your profile what your policy is? What do you think?
You could. I mean, I think it's a fine idea. One of the other things I started doing this year, I started to become flexible around my LinkedIn policy. And so when I get an invite, sometimes I'll look at them or look at their profile, and I will actually accept them into my LinkedIn, and I will write back, Dear Andrew, have we met before? I'm uncertain. I did some speaking engagements and 2 webinars this week. Do I know you? Please remind me. And you'd be amazed what you can flesh out with that question. Yeah. So that I'm seriously considering it, opening my network up, because what I also find is people are now connecting on LinkedIn on their devices, and they're not given the option to write a personal note.
Yeah, that's right.
So I don't want to not let somebody in my vast network if they really need it, and if I'd like to stay in contact with them. So, I mean, you could advertise it. I think it's totally up to you. I think it's about how you continue to grow and develop that relationship after they're in your network. So, for example, Simon and I are doing this piece together. It's really exciting work. I'm thrilled to be doing this with Simon. And, I went into my LinkedIn last weekend and invited 25 executives out of the Portland, Oregon area, because I knew a lot of CFOs in Portland, Oregon. So, I mean, it gave me an opportunity, again, right? I keep talking about exercising the network. Your network is only as strong as you continue to connect and build that relationship, whether it's virtually or otherwise. So I think it's not just hitting the connect button is what I'm trying to say. It's about what are you doing afterwards.
Definitely. And you picked up on an important point. If you connect to people on mobile devices, so I'm an Apple guy on my iPhone or iPad, it doesn't give you the opportunity to create a personal message. So you have to do it from your desktop, because the first rule is LinkedIn is about personalities, it's about people. So you've got to explain why you're getting in touch, and you've got to deliver a personal message. One of the things I do as a course of habit is I read loads of books, and when I read a book, I'll get to the end of it, and if I like the book, I'll go onto LinkedIn, I'll find the author, and I'll send them a connection request, and I'll put a personal message in there. We've done business together, and I put, wow, just read your book, thought it was amazing. I'm going to recommend it on Amazon, but I just wanted to reach out to you personally to let you know that. And I've never had anyone reject me from that, because I'm going there, explain the executive job seeker dichotomy a minute ago. I'm going there with a positive message about them, which isn't about me. And why would they not want to connect? And I built quite a reach in the States by doing that, because a lot of the books I read are written by US authors. And if you're looking to build your connections and your reach, that's one of the ways you can do it. There's various other ways you can do it, but that's just an example of something that I do on a regular basis. I think we'll take one more question, shall we? If that's
Sure.
okay. Let's take one more question. Let's have a look. Okay. Right, got a couple to choose from. So, John is asking about cover letters. Okay, cover letters. Do they still have a place? Should you send a cover letter? What should be in it? I think that's your question, John. Yeah, so cover letters, do they help you stand out? What do you think, Elizabeth? I'll let you kick off with that.
It's very funny that question just came up. So I wrote an article, and it was the things you should never say in a cover letter. And recruiter.com actually posted it, and it got 19,000 hits.
Wow.
So I can send you a copy of that if you'd like. Email me directly. I'll send you a copy of that. Here's the bottom line. Here's the synopsis of that article that went viral. It's a 50-50 shot. It's a 50-50 chance. I mean, I don't know, Simon, how many cover letters did you read? Like, most
None.
of them I don't read.
None.
Honestly.
No, I'd never read a cover letter, and I can tell you this. Probably shouldn't go on record saying this, but the recruiters that I know, 9 times out of 10 they didn't read the CV from start to finish, which means that people invest all of this time to perfect the CV. Yes, it should be as good as it can be, but successful job search is more than a CV, because you said earlier, Elizabeth, you'd have 50 applications. My last senior appointment I did, within 24 hours for a CFO, I had 148 applications. You can't read the CVs. So you're looking for somebody to stand out. Sorry, carry on.
You're good with numbers, right, Simon? I'm going to throw some numbers at you.
Oh, please don't.
I want to explain to the audience why you're going to get 30 seconds to 60 seconds on your resume. So I have between 20 and 30 open recs at any one time. Let's just say it's hellacious. Let's say it's 30 open recs, okay? So, Simon, if I have 30 open recs, I get in my slate that I'm going to talk to, that I'm going to take time out of my day, between 5 and 10 candidates. Mm-hmm. Let's say, just for low numbers, it's 30 open recs and I have 5 candidates. What's 30 times 5?
You're presuming that because I'm a qualified accountant, I'm very good at adding up. 30 times 5. It is. You put me on the spot here. 150.
That's right. It's 150. Yes, and I was leaning on your math prowess there. So 150 candidates. So that's 150 candidates that I talk to in a week. Now, this is not all the people that I've declined out. This is not the one director role with 50 to 75 to 100 applicants. These are only the people that I scheduled 30 minutes out of my day. And I book 30 minutes every half hour, 30 minutes, 2 days in advance, along with my consulting practice, along with my radio show, along with all the other things that I do. So I'm you got to get me on the hour kind of a woman. I'm very busy. So I have 150 candidates a week, and if you multiply that by 4 weeks in a month, you get 600 people a month I talk to. And what's that in a year? 600, I mean, it's thousands of people a year I talk to. This is why you get me for 30 seconds. And I have to say this, not to be overly American and brash.
7,200, Elizabeth. 7,200.
Yeah, that's a year. That's who I talk to in a year. So this is why you get 30 seconds to 60 seconds of my time, and I have to make a quick decision whether we're going to move forward or not, and if I'm going to base my reputation and my skill set and bring your skill set to the hiring manager, right? Because my reputation's on the line as well. So here's the other piece. What could you possibly say to me after 15 years of doing this? And, north of 100,000 resumes I've read, what is going to make you stand out for somebody like me that's seasoned, or somebody like Simon that's seasoned? That's what you want to think about when you walk away from this webinar. And if you need help with it, Simon and I are happy to help you to figure that out. But that's what it comes down to. And I know that's hard to hear. I understand that. But I'm just trying to tell you the game. And these are the rules in the game, and this is how you play. Because this is what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's the approach. Everyone has a CV, as I've explained. Recruiters don't have the time to read them, so it's about how you can approach in a slightly different way that gets you noticed, puts you in a memorable position, even if there's not an opportunity now, but maybe further down the track. For the cover letters, I'm just going to come back to that very quickly as the last point. If you're asked for a cover letter, you've got to produce one. Otherwise, it's simply a failure to follow instructions. But as a recruiter, I rarely read cover letters, and I certainly never read a cover letter that duplicated what was on a CV. That's just double the content to read. I just didn't have the time. So if you do have to write a cover letter, and a cover letter could be written form in terms of a letter, it could be an email, it could be a LinkedIn message. I have 3 things that I would advise you to do. You have a grabber, which is about the person you're trying to approach. What is it about them? Get them on side first. It's then a message that highlights something about your experience that might resonate with them. And then it's a call to action. What's going to happen next? Are you going to call them? Because you can't rely on that written communication. Are you going to call them? Do you want them to call you? What's the next step? Because all of this recruitment process, all of this initial engagement in the cyberspace world, which is where we started, is really to get you a face-to-face meeting. And when you've got that face-to-face meeting, and you start to run through an interview process, that's where decisions get made. So that's really what you're aiming for. So you have to push the relationship on each and every stage by clarifying what happens next. Good. We're 10 over the hour. I'd like to thank all of you on the line tonight for being here, or today, because it's afternoon, of course, in the States. Thank you for spending an hour and 10 minutes with Elizabeth and I. It's been great to have the opportunity to talk to you. If you would like to book one of those 15-minute calls with either of us, there's no obligation to take things further, but we'll answer your questions specific to you, and there may be something you didn't want to ask on the line tonight, which is absolutely fine. So please use my link and Elizabeth's email. Please connect to us on LinkedIn, give us some feedback. There's going to be a survey pops up at the end that will trigger. If you could fill that in, it's good to know whether you like this, whether you want more of this. And of course, if you're watching the recording, thank you for watching it. Please do the same. Please connect, and we'll hopefully see you. We'll hopefully see you again very soon. We've talked about future collaborations, and I think that's very much planned. We both have websites, and we both put out newsletters, so that's another way to keep in touch and to communicate. So thank you very much. Elizabeth, any last words from you?
Nothing more. Thanks for joining us tonight. Really excited to do this work. I feel like I'm connected to the whole wide world here. So thanks for having me. And I'm with Simon. Give us your comments, questions. Love to connect with you. And good luck in the job search.